My friends, I want to share with you tonight a truth so profound, so revolutionary, that it will shatter everything you think you know about money. Listen carefully, for what I am about to reveal has the power to transform your entire relationship with abundance. Every time you touch money, you speak even if your mouth is silent. Every time you hold it, pass it, count it, spend it, receive it, your entire being issues a command to the creative forces of the universe. Your assumption declares what shall be. The world has lied to you, my dear friends. They have told you that money is neutral, that it is separate from spirit, that it is a tool to be used and feared in equal measure. But I tell you, with all the conviction of one who has witnessed this truth in countless lives, money is not a dead thing. It is alive. It is consciousness made visible. Money is a servant of the law of assumption, and it listens with perfect obedience to the tone of your heart and the rhythm of your inner conversations. Most people touch money in fear. They hold it with hesitation. They count it with tension. They spend it with dread. They say, "I can't afford that," and wonder why money flees from them. They say, "Money doesn't come easily," and wonder why their purse remains empty. They speak lack while holding supply. They declare emptiness while touching proof of the infinite abundance that is their birthright. And then they wonder why it does not multiply. But listen to this carefully. Money does not respond to effort. It responds to assumption, to feeling, to the state of consciousness you occupy. You must now treat every money moment as sacred. Every bill you hold, every coin you find, every transaction you enter. These are not mundane acts. These are opportunities for the most profound spiritual demonstration. The moment you touch money, you are standing at the altar of creation. Your assumption in that moment either multiplies or diminishes your future. Your feeling either opens or closes the channels of abundance. Do not let another dollar pass through your hands without recognizing its true nature, without commanding it from the state of abundance, without speaking the truth over it from the feeling of already having received. I say this plainly, if you are not assuming increase when you handle money, you are silently permitting loss. Because in the realm of consciousness, there is no neutral state. When you assume nothing, the world assumes for you, and the world's assumption is always lack, limitation, and fear. But when you assume abundance, when you feel wealthy, when you live in the state of already having received, then money must obey. Not because of magic, but because of the immutable law of consciousness. Let your new assumption begin today. Every time you touch money, no matter the amount, you will enter a state. Not just say words, but feel the reality of what you are assuming. You will occupy the state of one who recognizes money as divine substance. When you handle money, assume this. Divine substance cannot be depleted. I recognize this money as spiritual reality made visible, and I see it multiply under grace in perfect ways. You must not speak as one who hopes. You must feel as one who knows, because consciousness does not respond to begging. It responds to the assumption of already having received. Money is not dirty, my friends. It is not evil. It is not carnal. That is the world's doctrine, not the truth of consciousness. The great deception is this, that money belongs to man, that it is created by governments, that it is earned by toil, and lost by circumstance. But I declare to you boldly, money is God's invisible supply made visible. It is divine substance, taking form according to your assumption. It is the formless becoming form in response to your dominant mental state. There is no conflict between money and spirit, only between ignorance and truth, between the assumption of lack and the assumption of abundance. The same consciousness that gives you life gives you sustenance. The same source that breathed you into being holds nothing back from your every need. When you separate money from the divine, you strip it of its power to multiply. But when you recognize it as consciousness made visible, you allow it to flow, to increase, to serve your every good. The issue is never the money itself. It is always the state of consciousness that handles it. Do not treat money as common. Do not approach it with fear, with guilt, or with disdain. Do not say, "It's just a dollar." Do not say, I hate dealing with money. Do not mock the instrument of your good. What you assume to be worthless cannot stay. What you feel resistant about cannot flow freely. What you resent in consciousness, you repel in experience. But what you recognize as divine, you multiply. What you assume to be abundant, you attract. What you feel grateful for returns with increase. Money is spiritual substance. It is a medium of exchange, yes, but it is also a mirror, reflecting your deepest assumptions about abundance. If you assume lack, it disappears. If you feel guilty about having it, it withholds itself. But if you recognize it as divine substance, if you feel it as a child of infinite abundance, it will flow toward you in ever-increasing waves. Never again assume money is hard to come by. Instead, live in the feeling of this truth. God is my instant, constant, and lavish supply. Large sums of money come to me quickly under grace in perfect ways. This is not mere poetry, my friends. This is the law of consciousness in operation. When you assume this with feeling, when you live in this state with conviction, it becomes your reality. It does not matter how much money you have now. What matters is the state you occupy when you think about money. Money is like water. It flows where it is welcomed with the feeling of abundance. It evaporates where it is cursed with the assumption of lack. You must become a sacred channel through which divine substance flows freely, not hoarded in fear, not clutched in desperation, but recognized and blessed from the state of already having received. Bless every dollar that enters your experience. Feel grateful for every coin you find. Assume abundance with every payment you make. And as you do, say from the depths of your being, this money is divine substance. It cannot be depleted. It flows to me and through me under grace and multiplies as it moves. You will discover that what once seemed to escape you now remains. What once appeared delayed now arrives swiftly. What once seemed hidden now reveals itself abundantly, not because the money has changed, but because you have changed. And as your assumption shifts, so must your world. This is not theory, my dear friends. This is not mysticism for its own sake. This is spiritual law in operation. Whatever you assume with feeling multiplies in your experience. This law works with mathematical precision. It does not matter what the world economy appears to be. It does not matter what your bank account seems to show. The moment you assume abundance with genuine feeling, without internal contradiction, you open the floodgates of divine increase. The law of multiplication is embedded in the very fabric of creation. The seed multiplies when planted in fertile soil. The loaves and fishes multiplied when blessed with gratitude. The talents multiplied when invested with faith. It is consciousness delighting to express itself as abundance. But that abundance cannot enter a heart that assumes scarcity as its natural state. Most people hold their last dollar in fear. They clutch it and say, I must hold on, or I'll have nothing. But I say to you, assume abundance with that dollar. Feel wealthy with that dollar. Recognize it as divine substance containing the spiritual pattern of millions. Let me share with you the story of a woman who had only $2 remaining. The world would have called her destitute, but she held those dollars in her hands and assumed this reality. This is God's money. It is spiritual substance. It cannot be diminished because God cannot be diminished. I feel it multiplying now under grace in perfect ways. Within 1 week, $6,000 had come to her through a channel she had never imagined. Did her assumption create the money? No, her assumption of abundance allowed her to receive what was already hers in consciousness. You see, the money is never absent. It is only out of harmony with your assumption. Your feeling is your tuning fork. Your assumption is your point of attraction. Your recognition of abundance is your invitation to receive. Stop asking where the money will come from. Instead, assume from the feeling, money is here. Money is ready. Money now multiplies under grace in perfect ways. Feel this not as a hope for the future, but as a present reality. The loaves and fishes were not multiplied through worry about supply. They were not multiplied through calculating the need. They were multiplied through the assumption of abundance, looking up with gratitude, giving thanks, and then proceeding from the state of already having received. You too must approach what you have, not with the assumption of insufficiency, but with the feeling of abundance. Take what you have, and assume this reality. I recognize this money as divine substance. I feel grateful for its presence. I assume its multiplication now, pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. Now I give you an assumption, not as a magic formula, not as empty words, but as a divine recognition of truth. This is a declaration to consciousness, a command to the creative forces within you. You are not saying it to convince God. You are not saying it to test the law. You are assuming it because you now understand that money responds to the feeling of abundance. Assume this every time you touch money. Divine substance cannot be depleted. I recognize this money as spiritual reality and feel it multiply under grace in perfect ways. Say it when you receive payment. Assume it when you pay bills. Feel it when you make purchases, when you give tips, when you transfer funds, when you count your money, when you make donations. Assume it with the breath of certainty. Feel it slowly, deeply. Assume it like a king recognizing his treasury, like a priest blessing a sacred offering, because that is exactly what you are doing. You are blessing your relationship with abundance. You are commanding multiplication, not through effort, but through recognition. The law of consciousness hears your assumption. The universe responds to your feeling. You do not need to know the channel through which increase will come. You do not need to calculate the mechanism. Your assumption is not about logic. It is about the feeling of already having received. When you assume abundance, you shift your entire vibrational state. When you feel wealthy, you rise above the assumption of lack. When you recognize money as divine substance, you align with the infinite storehouse that is always full. Let your relationship with money be transformed. You no longer touch it with dread. You no longer feel shame when you spend. You no longer shrink when you give. You no longer fear when you look at your accounts. You assume abundance, and the assumption governs the result. Money must multiply where it is recognized as divine substance. This is law, not because of your personal power, but because of the infinite creative force expressing itself through your assumption. You are not the source, you are the channel. You are the one who assumes, and the one who assumes abundance from the feeling of already having received plenty. You must understand this with absolute clarity. If money continues to elude you, it is not because money is unfaithful. It is because your assumption has been one of lack, and consciousness has faithfully reproduced your assumption as your experience. Every idle assumption you make about your financial situation becomes a command to the creative forces within you. Every time you assume, I can't afford that, or money goes out faster than it comes in, or I'm always struggling financially, you are not describing a condition, you are creating one. Consciousness does not analyze your intent. It does not consider your mood. It simply responds to your assumption with mathematical precision. Your subconscious mind hears your every mental declaration and moves to make your assumption your reality. You may think these assumptions casually, habitually, without much attention, but consciousness receives them as absolute instructions and proceeds to fulfill them with perfect fidelity. So I ask you, what have you been assuming about your money? What have you been feeling when paying bills? What have you been thinking when looking at your accounts? What have you been assuming in conversations about your financial situation? Every assumption is a seed in consciousness, and every seed brings forth after its kind. It is time to assume differently. It is time to feel abundance where you once felt lack. It is time to recognize divine substance where you once saw limitation. Assume this when you handle your finances. I do not operate from lack. I assume abundance as my natural state. Money flows to me freely because I recognize it as divine substance. This is not denial of present circumstances. This is recognition of the creative power within you. The reality that forms next will be the one that corresponds to your most dominant assumption. Every time you part with money, you are declaring what you assume about infinite supply. Most people assume they are being diminished when they pay. They feel they are losing something precious. But I tell you the truth, you are not spending money, You are circulating divine substance. What you release with the feeling of abundance returns to you multiplied, because you have assumed the law of increase to be operating in your experience. Payment is not depletion. It is a spiritual transaction. It is proof that you assume the source of all good will replenish what you have released. Never again feel fear when making payments. Never again assume loss when bills arrive. These reactions are assumptions of lack, and consciousness, hearing your assumption, responds not with increase but with more of what you have assumed. You must now handle money as a priest handles sacred vessels, with reverence, with recognition, with the feeling of abundance. When you pay for anything, assume this reality. I release this with joy, knowing that what I give in the feeling of abundance returns to me multiplied and overflowing. This is not wishful thinking. This is the mathematics of consciousness. What you assume with genuine feeling always returns with increase. What you release in the recognition of abundance creates immediate pathways for more. Payment becomes proof of circulation, and circulation is the law of consciousness made manifest. You were never meant to hoard in fear, to clutch in desperation, to assume scarcity. You were meant to assume abundance, to feel wealthy, to command the flow of divine substance. When bills arrive, assume this. This is not a burden. This is proof that I am trusted with divine substance. I send it forth with gratitude, and it returns to me tenfold. Now your bills are no longer sources of fear. They become opportunities to demonstrate your assumption of abundance. When you pay from the feeling of wealth, you transform apparent obligations into channels of increase. Your rent becomes a declaration of abundance. Your utilities become affirmations of supply. Your expenses become investments in the law of circulation. Feel grateful for your outgoing with the same intensity you feel grateful for your incoming, because it is all one flow, all one assumption made manifest. Every visible demonstration of wealth begins with an invisible assumption. There is no exception to this law. Your riches do not begin in the bank account. They do not begin in the job, the business, or the investment. They begin in consciousness. They begin with what you assume before they appear. Most people wait to feel abundant until they see abundance. But that is not how consciousness works. Consciousness is cause, not effect. The feeling of abundance is the cause. The visible wealth is the effect. I have witnessed this truth countless times. I knew a woman who had nothing visible to justify optimism. No money in sight. No opportunities apparent, no doors opening. But she had learned the law of assumption. She would sit quietly and assume this reality. I see abundance surrounding me. I feel wealthy now. I assume that large sums of money are flowing to me in perfect ways. She would actually visualize specific amounts, feel the reality of receiving them, live in the assumption of already having them. Before any physical evidence appeared, she was living in the state of abundance. And because consciousness must externalize what you assume with feeling, her assumption became her reality. Do not wait until you have proof to assume abundance. Assume abundance, and the proof will follow. Do not say, I'll feel wealthy when I see the money. That is the assumption of lack disguised as practicality. Instead, assume, I feel wealthy now, and my wealth is becoming visible because I have assumed it to be so. Your world is nothing but the externalization of your most dominant assumptions. Scripture reveals this pattern. God calleth those things which be not as though they were. This is the divine method. Not describing the seen, but assuming the unseen. Not waiting for abundance to appear, but creating it through assumption, and living in that assumption until it becomes visible. Your assumption is your spiritual mold. When you assume wealth with genuine feeling, your subconscious mind accepts the pattern and begins to arrange circumstances to match your assumption. So assume it before it appears. Feel it while your wallet seems empty. Live in it while your account appears insufficient. Assume not to convince yourself, but to instruct consciousness. And consciousness, once instructed through feeling, begins to gather all necessary elements to fulfill your assumption. Assume this now. I see riches surrounding me. I walk in financial abundance every day. My supply multiplies both visibly and invisibly. Feel it again tomorrow, and again the next day, until your inner world accepts it as fact, and your outer world can no longer resist its manifestation. Do not jest about money. Do not mock your supply. Do not make yourself the object of poverty jokes and expect wealth to honor you. This is not superstition. This is the law of consciousness in operation. Your subconscious mind has no sense of humor about your assumptions. It records every feeling, every assumption, every inner conversation as absolute instruction. It does not distinguish between what you assume seriously and what you assume jokingly. I remember a woman who repeatedly assumed, "One day I'll be living in a cardboard box." She laughed when she said it. Others laughed with her, but her subconscious mind was not laughing. It was accepting her assumption as her desired reality and arranging circumstances to fulfill it. Soon enough, that was exactly her situation. Not because she lacked ability or opportunity, but because she had assumed her own limitation and consciousness had faithfully reproduced her assumption. You must understand, there is no such thing as a neutral assumption. There are only assumptions that align with abundance and assumptions that align with lack. When you joke about being poor, your subconscious mind assumes poverty to be your desired state. When you mock the wealthy, your consciousness ensures you never become one. When you laugh at your own financial struggles, you extend your season of difficulty. Words and assumptions are not toys. They are tools of creation. They are sacred instruments of consciousness. Use them with reverence. Use them with intention. Use them only to assume what you truly desire to experience. If you have assumed foolishly about your finances, you can change your assumption now. Feel this reality. Every limiting assumption I have made about money is now canceled, reversed, and replaced by the assumption of abundance. Then replace every assumption of lack with the assumption of abundance. Replace every feeling of scarcity with the feeling of wealth. Replace every inner conversation about limitation with inner conversations about infinite supply. Say this instead: I assume only increase. I feel only abundance. I recognize only divine provision. Let your assumptions become your wealth, and let your inner conversations become your outer circumstances. If you would see wealth appear in your outer world, you must first assume it in your inner world. This is the formula of all manifestation, the divine architecture that governs all creation. First comes the assumption, then the feeling, then the visible manifestation. All things first exist in consciousness, then are sealed through feeling, then formed in the world of experience. This is the rhythm of divine demonstration, and it cannot be bypassed, rushed, or replaced by effort, logic, or luck alone. You must become the architect of your abundance. You must enter the sanctuary of your consciousness and build not with struggle, but with assumption, not with worry, but with the feeling of already having received. You must see your wealth before the world can see it. You must feel your abundance before the world confirms it. Consciousness waits for leadership, and your leadership begins with assumption backed by feeling. Let this become your daily practice. Close your eyes and assume your wealth, not in fantasy, not in desperation, but in the recognition of truth. See yourself abundant. Feel yourself financially free. Assume your bills are paid. Your accounts are full. Your giving is generous. Do not concern yourself with the mechanism. That is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to assume the end result and feel it as already accomplished. Then assume what you have visualized. Declare it with feeling. Even if your present circumstances seem to contradict it. Even if your bank account appears to mock it. Even if the world calls you delusional, assume it anyway. Assume, I see my wealth. I feel my abundance. I recognize my infinite supply. What I assume with feeling must now appear under grace and in perfect timing. Walk as one who has already received, and stop begging consciousness for what you want. Start assuming you already have it, and let your entire being move in harmony with your assumption. Stand with the posture of abundance, speak with the voice of wealth, and move with the confidence of one who knows their supply is infinite. These are not pretenses. They are the natural expressions of your assumption made manifest. There are two moments of extraordinary power in every day: the moment before sleep, and the moment of awakening. These are the sacred windows when your subconscious mind is most receptive to new assumptions. What you assume during these moments does not simply pass away. It plants itself deeply in the fertile soil of your subconscious and governs everything that follows. So I instruct you, assume abundance at night and assume abundance in the morning, not as routine, but as recognition of law. Consciousness responds to rhythm, to consistency, to the repeated assumption of your desired reality. Before you close your eyes at night, assume this. I now rest in the assumption of abundance. I see wealth surrounding me. Every dollar I touch is blessed and multiplied. I sleep in the feeling of financial freedom. Let this assumption be the last vibration your consciousness remembers. Let it echo through your subconscious mind while you sleep. Let your dream state be governed by abundance, not by fear. While you sleep, the assumption takes root. While you rest, your subconscious mind rearranges your inner world to match your assumption. And while you dream, consciousness moves unseen forces into alignment with your feeling of abundance. When morning comes, do not immediately engage with the world's assumptions about money. Do not check your phone, your email, your news, until you have first renewed your assumption of abundance. Greet your supply. Welcome the invisible wealth that is now moving toward you. Assume the same reality again with fresh feeling and renewed conviction. I wake in the assumption of abundance. I see wealth surrounding me. Every dollar I touch returns to me blessed and multiplied. I walk in financial freedom today. Touch your wallet, touch your purse, and recognize them not as mere objects, but as symbols of your assumption made manifest. There is one barrier more dangerous than doubt, more persistent than fear, more hidden than any obvious obstacle. It is guilt about wealth, guilt about wanting abundance, guilt about receiving while others appear to lack. This invisible thief of demonstration must be removed. For even when you assume correctly and feel genuinely, guilt in your heart will reject what your consciousness has accepted. You must cleanse yourself of every false belief that suggests you are unworthy of wealth, that wanting money is selfish, that having abundance is wrong. These are not spiritual truths. They are human interpretations of limitation wrapped in the disguise of morality. The truth is this: your wealth serves the highest good when you receive it through the recognition of abundance. Consciousness is not offended by your overflow. The infinite is not diminished by your plenty. Divine substance is not reduced by your abundance. When you assume wealth, you do not take from others. You simply align with abundance more quickly. You become a living demonstration that the law of assumption works. You become proof that consciousness can transform any circumstance. Feel this truth. It is right for me to assume abundance. I use money in love, and money flows to me in peace. The law of assumption never fails. It is not partial to some and not to others. It is not delayed by circumstances, economics, or opinions. It does not consider how long you have struggled or how many times you have failed. It responds to the assumption of abundance declared with feeling, backed by faith, and maintained with consistency. When you assume rightly and do not contradict your assumption, consciousness must fulfill it. Assume this with complete conviction. The law never fails. I assume my abundant supply, and it must appear under grace and in perfect ways. Let this become your unwavering assumption. Do not question how it will happen. Do not watch for immediate evidence. Simply assume and maintain your assumption until it becomes your reality. Because when you assume abundance with genuine feeling, the law of consciousness ensures that your assumption becomes your experience. And so it is, and so it shall be.